Our urinary system. This chapter begins on page 697, and this is the part of our body that we think of that has to eliminate the waste in our body. Our previous chapter was talking about the digestive system. So this is the type of fluid that needs to come out of our body because of the waste that we have going on inside our body. So that's what our urinary system is in charge of doing. So let's look at some of the reasons why our urinary system is very important. We have different ways that things can be excreted out of our body. Either we're going to breathe it out, we're going to sweat it out or excrete it out of our skin, it's going to come out our digestive system, or it's going to come out of our urinary system. So one way or another, these are only the 4 ways that we can get rid of waste inside our body. But our cells do have to have their nutrition at the same time that they're producing waste. So we do have to keep in mind that even though we need that important nutrition, we also have to get rid of the stuff that we no longer need. And again, it's only one of those 4 systems that our body has a way to get rid of that waste. So some of the parts that we're going to talk about in this chapter: kidneys, ureters, urethra, and the urinary bladder. The urinary bladder we have mentioned in other chapters, as well as the kidneys we have talked about in other chapters. When you look at page 697 and see all of the physiology or the functions of our urinary system, there's a lot going on. It's more than just eliminating waste. So when you look at that list, regulating our blood volume, regulating our blood pressure, regulating the red blood cells, maintaining our homeostasis, but also the pH and the chemical composition of our blood. So all of those are very important parts that we need to have for that homeostasis within our body. In the picture there, it's supposed to be kidneys. I mean, it kind of looks like a kidney bean on a little stalk, but the kidneys are going to be the first organ that we are going to talk about. And the kidneys are huge in what they are doing within our body. Excuse me. So there is a couple different pictures that we're going to be turning the pages back and forth and just looking at an overview of the entire kidney system. On page 698, you might want to look at that top picture just to see where the kidneys are located. They are the principal organs of the urinary system, and typically we have one on the right and one on the left. And just like what was in that last slide or the picture that's on here, kind of has that shape that we're all familiar with. But that indentation on the medial portion is a Hilus. So Hilus, Hilus. So that's just what that is called. But that's where the renal arteries, veins, and the ureters are going to enter and exit. So again, you might want to look at the picture on 698 to see that a little bit better. But also we have to think of, what do the kidneys do? So they're filtering our blood and producing urine as their job. So each kidney is a separate organ. Sometimes people have to have one kidney removed. The other one will pick up the slack and get up to speed about 80% of what that other one was doing. So it's amazing that our body can do that. We do have to have at least one kidney. Sometimes there is medical things that we can do to help when our kidneys aren't filtering like they need to be, but that's a whole nother category. So the kidney has 2 major regions. We have the outer and the inner. So we've had these terms before in previous chapters. The cortex is the outer region, the medulla is the inner region, and different things are operating within those, and we're going to look at that up close in the next couple slides. But first of all, we want to look at the 2 parts of the kidney structure, which is the renal pyramid and the renal columns. So the pyramid itself is just how they're organized, kind of in a triangular wedge, and the column is kind of how it sounds. It's just a different shape. You can see pictures of those on the right-hand picture on page 698, the renal column, the renal pyramid. So that's what's on the inside of each kidney. But now we need to look at really, are we looking at the entire kidney or one little part? The filtering unit that happens inside our big kidney is called the nephron. So that's your filtering unit. So a nephron is a structure with all these tubes that are filtering the blood, um, putting the nutrients out into our body, and forming and then helping to get rid of the urine that's being produced based on what we have going on in our body. Each nephron has its own blood component or vascular component, and it also has a tubular component. So we have about 1 million nephrons in each kidney. So when you look at the picture on 698, that's not our entire kidney I want you to think of. I want you to think of all the little millions of type of tissue that is in there that is a nephron. So the blood flow that is coming into our nephron is the vascular portion. And there's two parts to that vascular portion. It's the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule. The easiest place to see those is the picture that's on page 699, that bottom picture, or the top picture, either one. There's a little C shape with some red squigglies in the middle. So the Bowman's capsule is on the outside, and then on the inside is the glomerulus. Those are the blood or the vascular portion. The tubular portion, so these are just two parts of each nephron. The tubular portion is the renal tubule where our urine is formed. So when you look at the pictures on 699 and you see all those tubes going all over, that's one nephron that has to work within the cortex and the medulla to not only get those nutrients to process through and filter our blood, but also to start that production of urine. So it seems like there's a whole lot going on in these pictures, but if you look at the individual terms of the nephron, so the renal blood vessels, and then the tubular component or the renal tubule, that will help you distinguish what is happening. So the vascular component is the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule. That's why it's a little bit red on the top of the picture on 699. The tubular component is the more bottom portion because that's where the urine is being formed. The renal tubule, where urine is being formed, begins at that Bowman's capsule and then it ends down into that renal tubule. So we need to look at what is going on inside that portion. So this picture is on the bottom of page 700, and the part that we need to look at is, I kind of think of it as like the brain of our body. And it has a really fun name, Juxtaglomerular Apparatus. I mean, that is a mouthful. This is what is monitoring the blood pressure and the concentration level of what is happening between our renal tubules and the afferent arterioli. So I know that sounds really funky, but if you look at that picture on the bottom of 700, notice the very center is where the glomerulus is. And then they give you another up close picture of this juxtaglomerular apparatus, which is the green, the red, and the yellow tubes that are just trying to show you that inside the walls of this apparatus, these cells are detecting and monitoring the regulation of our kidneys, how well they're filtering, how much force is there that has to be used to press the blood up through our kidneys. And it's going to monitor that up and down all the time. So our blood pressure is being monitored by this specific apparatus. You might think of that cuff that we put on your arm when we need to take your blood pressure, but this is how it's being all created inside our body, or how it's being monitored inside our body. It depends on what's going on inside our nephron, which is inside our kidney, and we have 1 million nephrons in each kidney. So this one particular apparatus is in charge of monitoring, a couple million nephrons and trying to keep them all going in the same direction based on what my body is doing. So we have those receptors all throughout our body. We have mechanical receptors, we have chemical receptors, and this apparatus is monitoring and releasing or retaining that blood pressure as we need based on what's going on inside our kidneys. So the entire urinary system, our kidney is super important for many different reasons, but it is the principal organ of our urinary system. So we definitely need to keep our kidneys healthy. So moving on to maybe something that's a little bit easier than the kidneys. So this is the picture that's on the bottom of page 701, and it's showing where each kidney is. And now we know a lot of things about the kidney. You remember what the term for that indent is on that medial portion. You can see all the little bigger tubes that are going into the kidneys. Now you're familiar with what the renal artery and the renal vein are going inside that hilus. And then we have the ureter that is coming out of the kidney. So let's look at that long, slender tube first. So it's coming out of the kidney and it's going down to the bladder. So we hope that gravity is helping to get our filtered urine out of our kidneys and get down to our bladder. So this is just the tube that is helping that. But there has to be a little bit of muscle contraction, that peristalsis, that also is being pushed or helping that urine being pushed down in there. When the ureter is filling up, it does have some little valves in there to make it so that the urine doesn't go back up, so it's going to hold that pressure. So the kidneys are the largest and most principal organ. The ureters are just that long hollow tube. And then we come to our bladder, our urinary bladder. So this has that rugae on the inside that we mentioned in previous chapters. So this is how our bladder can get bigger, hold a little bit more urine, or perhaps get to the point where it says, I need to be empty. There is a muscle contraction that has happened to help us empty our bladder. But within our urinary bladder, there's also a lining that is helping that rugae move. So as the bladder is getting bigger, the muscles are helping to keep it stable so that it's not emptying when we don't want it to. The last part of the structures themselves is our urethra. So the kidneys to the ureter to the urinary bladder, and then we get down to the simple urethra. So it is another tube. It's coming out of the bottom of the bladder, and it's going to help that urine that was formed all the way up in our kidneys actually get out our body. So the picture on the bottom of 701 shows where that is happening. Notice that there is an internal and an external sphincter. So there's another term that I want you to remember from previous chapters as well. So they're trying to hold everything in that bladder so that it doesn't come out when we don't want it to. It is the same in male and female, but there's different things that happen in the urethra based on male or female. But either way, it's still the same type of job for the urethra. It has to get that urine out of our body. Urine itself is a sterile fluid when it's coming out of our urethra, but it does have different things, different waste products within it. Notice under urine and urination that it says it's 95% water and 5% other waste. And these are things that we don't want to build up in our body. So potassium, sodium chloride, the uric acid, etc., we do need to get rid of those things. On average, and I know nobody's really average, we're producing about 1 liter of urine a day, but there's different factors that can affect it depending on what we drink, if we're excited, our physical factors, so things like that. It also can be dependent on what's in the things that we are putting in our body. So there is certain types of drinks, caffeine or coffee, tea, that type of thing. It has a diuretic effect. So that means it's going to promote a little bit more of our urine. It's going to give us a little bit more of that diuretic effect. Alcohol can also do that. But there is a difference between urine and urination. So urine is what is being formed, that sterile fluid, but urination is when it is coming out of our body. So you also can refer to that as voiding or micturition. Same thing, it's just that urination when those internal and external sphincters open up and everything comes out. I know we just focused a lot on the urine being formed and how it really happens within our kidneys, but our urinary system is part of creating the balance of fluid within our bodies. And most often we might think of that as urine, but think of all the other fluids that are floating around. So our kidney is filtering our blood, and urine is just the waste that is coming out. But we have other fluids that our body cells need. So the picture I have here is on page 703, and it is showing some of the other fluids within the body. So we have two major categories of the body fluids. It's either extracellular or intracellular. So if you take those prefixes apart, you could probably figure out one's on the outside of the cells and one's on the inside of the cells. So we want to look at how does our body balance that all of that information. Remember, we are just trillions of cells. So now we're going to talk about one cell of all of our trillions that is trying to balance out. In order to maintain a balance within our body of our fluids, we have to look closely at what is made up of all, or what parts are made up of all of that fluid. So in chapter 24, we talked about hormones. And again, I think that hormones get a bad rap, but hormones are part of our fluid balance that we need. So on the left-hand side of the bottom of 703, it lists out some hormones, which were on that table in chapter 24, if you want to go back to that page, and look at some of those different hormones that are helping us maintain our fluid balance. Some of them are opposites of each other or antagonistic, but some of them are working together. So I want you to be familiar with all of the hormones that are involved in fluid balance. And if we don't have balance, then we have some more severe things that are happening. So I want you to think of a fluid imbalance again as within each cell. When we talk about dehydration or edema that happens, we think of it of an area of our body. But I want you to go down to the cellular level, because really that's what the entire course is. It's learning how our body functions on the inside. So when we think of a cell that is getting dehydrated, and we're trillions of cells, probably there's more than one cell that is dehydrated. So dehydration is the excess loss of water from the body. So what do you think is happening to that cell? Or bunches of cells, a million cells, or a couple million cells? Perhaps they are all dehydrated. And one of the ways that we can check that is a term called skin trigger. So in the book or on the screen, it tells you that you can pinch your skin, and how quickly your skin goes back to where it was is the definition of a fluid balance within your body. Are you dehydrated? Does that skin go back quickly? Age is something that affects us, so we take that into account as well. But still, it should go back, and that little area that you squeezed or pinched shouldn't remain up. So that can be a sign of a fluid imbalance within our body. You can do it easily on your arm, but you can do it anywhere on your body to check to see what the dehydration level is. One of the other ways that our body becomes out of balance is when fluid accumulates in an area. So this is edema. Edema is different than swelling. Swelling occurs as when a part of our body perhaps has a trauma and it needs to have those lymph nodes hold things stationary. It's going to have a little inflammation to it. So it's different than the accumulation of fluid, which is edema. So it's just that abnormal accumulation. Maybe you've seen somebody have edema when after they had surgery, or maybe they had some sort of blockage within their body, and they're going to have this edema. But there is two types of edema, and depending on where you're going in your future, you probably are going to need to know the difference between pitting edema and non-pitting edema. So just like we talked about with skin trigger, you can press your finger into your arm, and if it's non-pitting edema, no depression is going to happen. Your skin is going to pop right back. Pitting edema is where that accumulation of body fluid holds that finger point or that impression in your skin. So that would be pitting edema. And again, depending on where you're going in the rest of your career, that could be something that you want to be very aware of for your clients. So those fluid imbalances can also happen not only on our arm or around our ankle, they can happen inside our lungs. They can happen inside our brain. So different areas that fluid balance can have edema come out. Sometimes we can see them, sometimes we can't. So all of that balance within our body is what our urinary system is helping to maintain.